Only at Rise Up could I be introduced as the old boy. Well, Merry Christmas to all of you. Day 6. I love Christmas. I think you probably all love Christmas. Andre was talking about the love languages yesterday and how, some people like words of affirmation and some like acts of service. I think all of us like getting gifts. So if any of you have anything that you want to give, my room is on the 10th floor, 00. So this year I got a bunch of really good stuff. My wife bought me a kite, which is probably a gift. Anybody else here get a kite for Christmas? No. But who here would want to get a kite? Yeah, exactly. So I was thrilled. Even better than that, my parents and my in-laws bought me a snowblower. Who here got a snowblower for Christmas? Who here would want a snowblower? Yes. Yes. I'm looking forward to using both of those gifts at the same time. We'll see how that goes. But perhaps the greatest gift was from some friends of ours gave us a little gift basket and had a few different things in it. One was a $100 gift certificate for Loblaws, and one was a $25 gift certificate for McDonald's. Now, I'm a math guy. I love numbers, and I know how the numbers work, and I know 100 is greater than 25, but I'll be honest with you, that if I had to throw one of those in the garbage, I wouldn't be getting rid of the 100, or I wouldn't be getting rid of the McDonald's one, because I love McDonald's. Nobody admits that. You all go to McDonald's and you say, well, I go to McDonald's because it was quick, or oh, it's cheap. No. You go there because you love it. It's true. McDonald's is a wonderful, wonderful place. McDonald's has 35,000 restaurants throughout the world. They use 7% of the potatoes grown in the United States, 95% of the sesame seeds grown in Mexico, and 1 in 8 Americans will at some point in their life work at McDonald's, and McDonald's doesn't sell toothpaste. No, it's true. I don't know if you've ever ordered toothpaste, but if you've tried to, they won't give it to you, which doesn't make any sense to me because McDonald's is trying to make money, and toothpaste is a $20 billion industry. So why on earth would McDonald's not sell toothpaste? Well, McDonald's, their mission statement is to be people's favorite place or favorite food and favorite place to eat and drink. So McDonald's just doesn't do toothpaste. It's unfortunate because, we go there to eat and some of us are there more frequently than others. Sometimes we even have to justify that we go there. But this is the way that I figure it. Your brain is 60% fat. Your brain is not made of lettuce, carrots, and quinoa. You're all students. You want to feed your brain. I'm just saying. But you'll never go there to get clean teeth. And the reason is McDonald's doesn't exist to sell toothpaste. That's not the business that they're in. That's not their identity. That's not their mission. That's not why they were started. So because that's not why they exist, that's not what they do. Any organization, whether it's a business like McDonald's or a nonprofit or a governmental organization or a religious group, if they want to be successful, they have to do 3 very basic things. They have to know who they are. That's their identity. Then they have to know what they do based on that identity. That's their mission. Then they have to do it really well. You're never successful if you don't know who you are, and if that identity doesn't inform what you do, and if you don't then go and do it well. That's why everyone in this room knows exactly what McDonald's does, but none of you have ever read their mission statement. Because they do what they exist to do, and they do it exceedingly well. And if we get our identity right, if we understand who we are, then what we do and how we do it just naturally flows out of it. That doesn't just happen for organizations. That actually works in our individual lives. That works for us as well. Who we believe that we are deeply influences the way that we live our life. If we know that we are a child of God, that we are made for greatness, that we are worth the blood of Christ, that we are the pinnacle of creation, that God made us simply so that he could delight in us, and love us and be loved by us. We live a very different life than if we think that we are, as St. John Paul II said, the sum of our weaknesses and failures. That's how many of us live. We think we are the sum of our weaknesses and failures, of our sin, of the way we've been wounded in this world, and that those things define us. And we allow those things in some sense to become our identity. And when we do that, we live out of that broken and wounded identity. Last night, Andre called us all to live out of our true identity. Our identity, which is the beloved sons and daughters of the King, of God the Most High. You know, and even if we have this great identity, sometimes we forget it. I think of Prince Harry. He's a prince, literally. And he's also a bit of a dork. Like, he can't seem to pull his life together. I'm not going to go through the laundry list of things that he's done, but he seems to kind of forget this very regal, literally, or noble call that he has to be a prince. And instead, he lives like a 17-year-old brat for most of his life. And we're kind of like that. We're like daughters and sons of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. We're the princesses and princesses of the world. And we live sometimes like the 17-year-old brat because we forget who we truly are. Okay. So what's the point of all this? Well, I'd like to spend a bit of time today looking at the identity of the church. And it's not just that the church is some organization. The church is us. The church is the body of Christ, and you and I are members of this body. So when we look at the identity of the church, we're looking at our own identity, who we are, and who we're called to be, and how we're called to live. And I'd like to start, actually kind of in a backwards sort of way, by looking at the parish. All of you, or many of you, have been raised in the Catholic faith. You've been part of a parish. You're part of a parish now. And when you leave CCO, you'll spend the next 60 or 70 years of your life as a member of a parish. Recently, Pope Francis said that in all of its activities, the parish encourages and trains its members to be evangelizers. In all of its activities, the parish encourages and trains its members to be evangelizers. Really? He must be talking about every parish other than the ones that I've ever been to. Because the parish I grew up in, I was there for 22 years. We didn't have a single convert in 22 years at that parish. And the parish when I moved to Toronto that I went to, the only activity they had going on between Sunday Mass and the next Sunday Mass was yoga on Wednesday nights. And a parish that one of my friends is at, the parish has shrunk to such a point that they no longer have Mass in the church. They have it in the sacristy, which is like the little place where the priest gets his vestments on. And then recently I was at a parish down in the United States. It used to be the largest parish in the state. It had 5,000 families. And I asked one of the kind of keeners in the parish, so what's going on now? And she said, well, every 6 years, sorry, not every 6 years, every 6 months, we run a little Bible study and we get about 5 people out for it. So I'm not really sure what Pope Francis is talking about when he says all parishes train and equip people to be evangelizers. Because if that was the case, I think we would see in our parishes, we'd see them growing. We'd see our parishes flourishing. Our parishes would be places that we would want to bring people to. I was running a little program on evangelization a couple years ago. And a lady said to me, she said, Michael, this would be great. I want to lead people closer to Christ. I want to draw them into friendship with them. I want them to repent and to know the good news and to give their life fully to it. But she said, I don't know what to do with them because I could never bring them to my parish. I mean, if someone really had a deep and authentic conversion and then they came and saw my church, they'd go right out the other door. So what's the Pope saying? Well, he says that the parishes train and equip all their parishioners to be evangelizers. But I think he's not saying that's what's happening. I think what he's getting at is that it reveals something of the parish's identity. And if it's revealing something of the identity of the parish, then it's revealing something of your identity and of my identity. And the identity that it reveals is that the reason the parishes exist is to evangelize. So what does that mean? Well, to evangelize just means to bring the good news to other people in a beautiful way that invites them into friendship and communion with God so that they can enjoy his presence and his grace in this life and spend eternity with him forever in heaven. And so the Pope is saying that's why our parishes exist. That's what they're supposed to be doing. You know, that's actually the very reason the Catholic Church herself exists. That's what the Catholic Church does or is supposed to be doing. I mean, have you ever thought of that? Have you ever wondered, why did Jesus bother starting a church? I mean, what's the whole point of it? Why do we even need to have a church? Why didn't Jesus kind of just do his thing, perform a few miracles and leave some teaching and heal a few people and, go through the passion and his death and resurrection and then, ascend into heaven? Why did he bother at the last minute with his last words, send forth the apostles and come at Pentecost and send his Holy Spirit upon them? Why did Jesus bother doing that? Well, I think it just makes sense. I mean, Jesus came to save us in this life-giving friendship that he and the Father and the Holy Spirit have longed to have with us forever. So Jesus comes down, and as I said, he goes around and he heals and he teaches and he instructs and he admonishes and he does all sorts of wonderful things, and he dies for our salvation. And he rises to save us from the consequence of our sin, to open the gates of heaven, and to reestablish friendship with us. But it remains conditional. And the condition is that we have to say yes to it. He doesn't force it on us. He allows us to choose whether we will say yes or no to the salvation that he has won. So then Jesus thinks, okay, so I've died on the cross for them, and I've risen from the dead, but somehow, I've got to get this out. I've got to make this salvation available for every person that ever lives. So what will I do? How will I do it? I mean, he didn't have, he couldn't text people or put on Facebook. He didn't have anything. The only thing he had were the 12 men that had followed him for the last 3 years. So Jesus starts the church with them so that they can carry forth his message in all of space, in all of time. So that you and I could have faith today, so that you and I could hear last night the message of salvation from Andre and respond to it. That's why Jesus gave us the church, to make his salvation possible for all. Most Catholics have no clue why the church exists. If you went down, you can wind your way down the stairs and go to the train station. You stopped 100 people randomly, and you said, I'm just curious, why do you think the Catholic Church exists? What kind of reasons would they give you? Well, they might say, it exists to tell people what to do. It exists to oppress certain groups. It exists to make people feel good. It exists to take their money. It exists to meet some sort of nebulous spiritual needs that people might have. It exists to have a sense of community. Out of 100 people, how many people would say, well, I think the Catholic Church exists to evangelize? Probably about 0. But if you ask them, why does McDonald's exist? Every single one of them would tell you. Every one of them would know why. Because McDonald's has been so good at doing what they do. It seems like in the church, in our lifetime and maybe the generation before us, we've kind of forgotten what we exist to do. It's not that the church herself has forgotten. The church will never forget. But it's almost like our parishes have forgotten. It's almost like our parents have forgotten. It's almost like even some of our pastors have forgotten. It's almost like people around us have forgotten. So we're trying to figure out what this Catholic life is all about. It's like everybody around us has kind of forgotten what they do. Imagine all the employees at McDonald's get amnesia. They wake up, they go into work the next day, and they're like, well, what do you think we should do today? Someone's like, I don't know, we should do a drop-in center. That sounds like a great idea. Maybe we should fly kites. Wow, great. I don't know, why don't we start up a nightclub? Sure, that would be fun. Why don't we sell Big Macs? I don't know, that's so 2011. No. They don't try to discover what exists what they exist to do. They know it because they've seen it over and over and over again. And so it's a bit tricky for us because we haven't always seen it over and over and over again. So we face kind of this double dilemma of not really knowing what our mission is, and even if we know it, not really acting on it. And this is the call that God's placing on our hearts today, to recapture that vocation that he's given to the church. And that means that vocation that he's giving to each and every one of us. Imagine a professional hockey team. What is an NHL team? What do they ultimately want to do? What do the players really want? They want to win the Stanley Cup. So imagine every year the president of the team, the general manager of the team, the goalie, the captain, everyone in the organization says, our goal this year is to fully commit ourselves to winning the Stanley Cup. And then that year they don't win. And the year before they said the same thing and they didn't win. And the year before, and the year before that, and the year before that. And no offense to Maple Leaf fans, but imagine... Imagine you hadn't won the cup in 40 years or 50 years. People would say, are you really serious? Like every year you say, this is the year. Because everything's really different than last year when you guys stunk, right? This is a year that's going to be different. You wouldn't take them seriously. Because it's easy to say. It's easy to say we're going to win. But the words don't mean anything. Every year in March, my friend sends me an email saying, just that you know, Michael, the Leafs have canceled the Stanley Cup parade again for the year. Because every year, they don't do what they say they're going to do. It's not enough for us just to use words. It's not enough for us just to kind of have wishful thinking that one day we'll see the church thriving again, that many people will come to know and love Christ, that society will be transformed, that the gospel of life will be heard by all and responded to. It's just wishful thinking to say that unless we're actually serious about doing something. That's like me making a New Year's resolution to say, well, I'm going to be an astronaut this year. Or, I'm going to be an Olympian this year. Unless they add sleeping in to the Olympics, I am not going to Rio. Because it doesn't matter what we say, it matters what we do. It matters that we act upon it. And so think about parishes again for a second. It's not enough to just acknowledge that parishes exist to evangelize. We have to actually be engaged in that. Parishes have to say yes to that. And that means you and I have to say yes. Now, many of you aren't deeply integrated into parishes right now. You're more involved in CCO than you are in your parish. But the same thing applies to your involvement in CCO. It's not just enough to say, well, wouldn't it be great if more people came to CCO events? Wouldn't it be great if more people did Discovery? Wouldn't it be great if more people were touched by the love of God? It's a good thing Andre's taking care of that. Andre's a grandpa. He has no energy, okay? It's over, okay? Can someone who's under 50 start taking up the mantle again and responding to the call? That's your call now. Because Andre was your age at one point. Andre was your age when he heard the call to start CCO. To say, we got to start doing something about this. We have to start responding to this call. When I was involved with CCO, I went to the first Rise Up year 2000. I went to World Youth Day in Rome. I was on Impact Canada in 2002. The words that I would use to describe my experience of CCO would be, it was vibrant, it was dynamic, it was exciting, it was engaging. It was kind of the place you wanted to be. And I think that's very attractive, which is probably why there's 700 or 800 of you here right now. Because there's something that makes you want to be part of this. That's not always the case in our parishes. Very few people would describe their parishes as vibrant, alive, dynamic, engaging. I just love to bring people to my parish because I know if they come that they'll experience the presence of God through the beautiful liturgy and through the profound homilies and through the intense community and through all the wonderful things that are offered there. You're being given a taste of what the Catholic Church can be. But it's not just for you. It's not like, woo, well done. I get a taste of it, so I can just kind of live in the afterglow of that for the next 6 decades. You're being given a taste of it so you can take that back into the world. Now, I'm not here to talk about parish renewal and parish vitality, but here's the point that I'm trying to make with all of this. I don't get too excited about many parishes that I visit. And my job is I work in parishes. That's what I do. That's my job, and I don't get very excited by many of them. But what I get really excited about is the potential that exists within parishes, the potential that exists within the church today, the potential that exists within you, within movements like CCO, within those young people that are responding to the gospel and want to do something with it. You know, it's not your job, it's not your position to inherit a vibrant church from your parents. It's your job to create one, to be engaged in the transformation of the church for your children, so that your children can go to parishes that are vibrant and dynamic, so your children can hear the gospel proclaimed throughout their experience of the church. When I was in high school, Bill Gates, most of you probably have heard of Bill Gates at least. He was the founder or president, not anymore, but he was, of Microsoft. And in the 1990s when I was in high school, Microsoft was kind of like the big tech company. So what Bill Gates would do every year in March or April is he would call the top 2 students from all of the best engineering schools in North America. So I lived in Kitchener-Waterloo, so he would call the top 2 computer science or computer engineering, whatever, guys from University of Waterloo, and he'd offer them a job. So, you can imagine, he calls you up and he's like, hi, this is Bill Gates. Hope you're doing well. We'd love to have you work for us. We'll pay $100,000 a year. You can have all the pizza, wear tight black jeans. You can do whatever you want, for the rest of your life. Just sit there and code until your eyes turn green. And no offense to computer science people here, but and they'd love it. So they'd all say yes to it, because Microsoft was kind of the place to be. But then they sort of ran into a bit of a problem. And the problem was that young people with passion and with vision and with conviction, they didn't want to work for Microsoft anymore. And all of a sudden they started going to these real small, companies that were kind of being run out of people's garages, like Facebook and Twitter and Google. And why was that? It's because people, especially particularly young people, they don't want to be caretakers. They want to be builders. And Microsoft kind of became, they were already well established. They'd sort of done their thing. It's like their ship had sailed. I'm not interested in that anymore. I want to do something that's going to have a great impact. And you and I, all of us here, we are in an immensely privileged position that we are called to be builders right now. Builders within our communities, within the church, builders of the church. And I don't mean that, of course the church is there. I mean it in the sense of bringing the gospel into the church for the salvation of individuals and the transformation of our communities and our society. We're not just called to be there to preserve. We're not just called there to be kind of passive members that, we go because we like it and it's good for us. And, we like going to Rise Up and we like the music and it's nice to go on retreats and it's fun to go on missions and we like going to Mass and it's great to feel like we've been forgiven when we go to confession. That's all about me. That's just kind of a gross distortion of the individualistic, consumeristic society that we live in. That's just us taking society and sprinkling a little bit of religion on it and saying, well, the way that I kind of get excited about things is I just kind of do the religious thing. And that's what feeds me. That's just as selfish as someone that says, I want to be rich and powerful and famous because that's what makes me happy. Now, it's wonderful. It's wonderful that our faith brings us great joy. It's wonderful that we love being part of CCO. It's wonderful that we come to Rise Up and we get all jazzed up and we're excited. It's wonderful we go on a great mission project and meet great friends and feel like we're doing great things. Those are all good things. But they're not sufficient. Because we haven't given ourselves. It's easy to sit there and be a consumer. But God's inviting us to something much, much greater. Think of a son of a farmer. So the father retires, and the son or the daughter takes over the farm. Everything's built. They've got the big barns, and they've got the cattle, and they've got the fields that are planted, and they've got the big tractor and the beautiful farmhouse, and things are good to go. So the son or daughter, they just kind of keep things going, and they plant the field, and they harvest the crop, and they feed the animals, and they, repair the barns if they need it. And they can really say in a real way, this farm is mine. There's a sense of ownership. Now imagine someone, let's say your age, they buy a plot of land. It's got bushes on it and trees, it's overgrown. And from the sweat of their brow, with their own hands, they clear the land. And they literally till the soil with their own hands because they don't have any money. They don't have a big barn, they don't have a big tractor, they don't have any of that stuff. And the first year, they plant just a small crop. And after a couple of years, they build this small wooden barn from the wood that they've harvested from the land. And they get a couple chickens. A couple of years later, they get a pig or a cow. They build a little bit bigger barn. Things are really good. They get to buy a real small tractor to help them do it. They clear a little bit more land. Things grow. And eventually, over 10, 20, 30, 40 years, they look out on the land, which is now 100 times bigger than that first plot they had. What do they see? They see the big barn. They see all the animals that they have. They see their big tractor. They see the well-tilled and planted soil. And they say, this is my farm. Which of those two is right? Well, both of them are in a sense. But the second one, the one that invested everything, that put their whole life into it, can say in a much more profound and real and meaningful way, this is mine. I have given my life to this. That's the place you and I are in the church right now. The church, the land has gone a little bit fallow. The animals are a little bit sick. The barns are a bit leaky. And God is inviting you and I to be pioneers right now. Not like that first example. Not the one that just inherits when things are flourishing. Ones that are going to rebuild. And the question for you to answer in your heart today is, will you be part of that building generation? That generation that 500 years from now, people will look back upon and say, that was the generation that lit the fire in the world that is burning brightly today. They're the ones that in the midst of the culture of death, in the midst of the most consumeristic, materialistic culture, they're the ones that said no to the lies of the world and yes to the promises of Christ. They're the ones that turned that fallow land into fertile ground. So the question is, if we're going to do that, how are we going to do it? It begins with our identity. It begins with believing that we are called to do this. I haven't been keeping track of my time. Could someone let me know how much time I have left? Just yell it out for me. I get unlimited. That's what I heard. Great. Hope no one has to go pee. Okay. Well, just turn off the mic when I've gone too long. 3 minutes? 3 minutes. Okay. No way. Okay. I think I have a bit longer than that. Okay. Anyway. But we have to rediscover our identity. We have to rediscover what it means to be a Catholic and to be part of the Catholic Church. I think I'm going to give you 4 quotes very quickly that I think if we embrace these, if we chew on these, if we live these out, they will transform the world and they will transform our life. And I'm going to give you 4. They're kind of chronological because I want to see that this is the way the church has been speaking for the last 5 generations. Or the last 5 decades. The first is from Pope Paul VI, 1975. He said, evangelizing is in fact the grace and vocation proper to the church. She exists in order to evangelize. That's why the church exists. I'm not making that up. CCO isn't making that up. That's what the popes are saying. The church exists to evangelize. So, If the church exists to evangelize the whole world, how does she do it? Well, by creating dioceses. Because what happens is the diocese carries out the mission of the church in a particular region. But the bishop, as great as our bishops are, they can't do it all themselves. So what does the bishop do? He creates parishes. And the whole purpose, the only reason the parish exists, is to carry out the mission of the church in a particular area. That's to evangelize. Now imagine if parishes got that. Imagine if parishes understood we exist in order to evangelize. Imagine what that would do to all the activities that go on. So when you're part of a parish and you're getting involved and engaged in the parish, ask yourself, is what I'm doing committed to drawing people into deeper communion with Christ? Number 2, John Paul II, 1990. I sense the moment has come, he said, to commit all of the church's energies to the new evangelization and to the mission ad gentes. When I survey parishes and I ask them, what percentage of your resources are being dedicated right now to evangelization? The number I inevitably get is 5% of our resources. Well, John Paul II said, I sense someone has come to commit all of our energies. All of them. Why? Because today in Canada, 85% of baptized Catholics don't even go to Mass. And of those 15% that do, the majority of them aren't living in deep friendship with Christ. They've forgotten their first call. And so there's this tremendous need for our parishes to be instruments in drawing people towards God. But we can apply that not just to the parish, but to your work in CCO, your involvement as a student or as a staff member. How are you committing all of your time and energies towards the new evangelization? Well, you can do that by inviting people to do a discovery faith study, by bringing them to one of the summits, to a cornerstone. You can be part of a mission project. Next year, you can bring 3 friends to Rise Up. CCO is not just a great Catholic social club. It exists for you to be evangelized and then for you to go out into the world. So John Paul II is saying, the time has come for you to commit all of your energies to the new evangelization and the mission ad gentes. Then Pope Benedict said, in virtue of our baptism, we have an inherent missionary vocation. If you've been baptized, if you could just put your hand up for a second. Oh my, oh boy. Some people think, well, I'm involved in pro-life work, and she's involved in the liturgy committee, and they're involved in social justice, and they're involved in cleaning the church, and they do evangelization, and I go to the prayer group. That evangelization thing just isn't for me. Well, what the church says is in virtue of your baptism, you have 2 calls. The first call is the call to be a saint, the call to holiness. That's not just, it's not like, well, I'm too busy with other stuff, so, that's just not for me. I love being a Christian, but holiness isn't for me. That's like saying, I love being a Christian, but prayer isn't for me. Or to saying, I love being a student, but learning isn't for me. Well, you don't have to be a great student, but if you are a student, you have to be a learner. And the same is true about evangelization. Our 2 calls to holiness and to mission. It's not an optional part of being a Catholic. It's an integral part. To be a Christian means we're called to be holy, and we're called to call other people to holiness. We're called to draw other people closer to Jesus. So we are called to live the missionary life that we are given. And we think, a mission, I got to go off to Africa, or I got to go off to, to Asia or somewhere else. No. It means you have to talk to your roommate. It means you have to invite people to something. It means you have to share with the person next to you in class what God did for you at Rise Up. It means everywhere we go, my friend says, our mission territory is our life. Your life is where you're called to be a missionary. 4th quote from Pope Francis: evangelization is the task of the church. Sometimes we think of evangelization like a task, like a duty, like a burden. Imagine I said to you, your task for the year is you're going to join this team that is just 3 months away from finding the cure to cancer. You'd be like, oh man, do I have to do that? Your task this year is to go to the International Space Station. Oh, bummer. I want to go to Florida for March break. Your task this year is to save the life of a starving child. Oh, gosh. It's right when my favorite TV program's on. If that was your duty and your task this year, you'd be like, wow. Your task this year is to save souls. That's your task. That's the gift. So John Paul II said, this is your privilege to lead people to Christ. Why does the church tell us that we need to do this? Why do we need to evangelize? Why does it matter? Well, sometimes we think, well, because a friendship with Jesus is great. Yeah, it's great. It's awesome. I love being Jesus' friend. It's cool. But that's not the reason. It's because there's heaven and there's hell. And when we die, we go to one of them. And every person that's ever lived and ever died goes to one of those places ultimately. The work of evangelization isn't to give people a nice coping mechanism to make life easier here on earth. It's not like, oh, if you give your heart to Jesus, your life will be great. No more suffering, lots of joy, fun mission trips. No. I mean, maybe. Probably not. If you give your heart to Jesus, you can spend eternity in perfect communion, perfect fulfillment with him forever. And if you don't, if you reject God in this life, if you say, I do not want you in my life, when we die, God will grant us the desire of our heart. And we will have chosen to separate ourselves from him forever. And the only way to heaven is by communion with Jesus Christ. So we've been given the privilege of being God's instruments in drawing people into that. There was a young university student once by the name of Francis. He went to the University of Paris. And he was handsome. He was athletic. He was a high jumper. He liked wearing nice clothes. He liked to party. And the only problem he had a great career ahead of him. The only problem Francis had was that he had this pesky roommate by the name of Ignatius. Ignatius of Loyola, who was going to be a great warrior until he got hit in the knee by a cannonball and kind of derailed his plans. And Ignatius loved Francis. And he prayed with him and he spoke to him about Christ. And he said, Francis, you want to be someone great. You want to have a great career. You want to do great things. You want to be famous in all of this. I have something better for you. I have something that will build something for eternity. So Francis eventually heard the call of the gospel and responded to it. And he was sent off. This is Francis Xavier. He went off to India and to Japan. One of the greatest missionaries the church has ever seen, converting tens of thousands of people. Once he wrote back and he said, my arms are exhausted from baptizing so many people. Wouldn't that be great if our priest, that was an occupational hazard? Just saying. We have to give them Mondays off because they can't lift their arms up. Francis Xavier could have been a great man in the world that no one here would have ever heard of. Because there were hundreds of other students at the University of Paris that had went on to have great careers, who were great high jumpers, wore nice clothes, had lots of friends, and slept with lots of girls. But there's only one person from the University of Paris that you've ever heard of. And that was someone that set aside all of the false promises of the world and lived his life only for the gospel. You know, lives of self-service, lives that are comfortable, that are easy, that fill us, those lives are easily forgettable. History doesn't care about those lives. Lives of self-gift, lives of authentic love, lives of self-sacrifice. These lives have an eternal impact. What life do you want to live?